listening to Let's Talk About Ethics with me, Evie Wenting. And my guest today is Adesola Makoko, who is a global ethics and investigation leader who spent 14 years at Unilever leading cross-border investigations and integrity strategy across North America and West Africa. She directed more than 260 investigations annually and worked closely with executive and board-level stakeholders in high-stake environment. Her focus is on whether investigations hold under a real-world pressure, which led to development of the ATLIA Investigative Integrity Framework. Hi, welcome back. This is Evie Wenting from Ethical Edge Experts, and we are on the Let's Talk About Ethics podcast. And I am here today with Desi, and we are talking about ethics, compliance, integrity, and everything in between, and especially focusing on investigations today. Two words: confidentiality of investigation versus transparency. How, in few words, how should someone who it has to investigate any matter, and when we come to compliance investigations, they're all sensitive, right? There is not sensitive matter, but people also want to know. So how do you navigate between those two?
Very good question. Like I said, investigations come with buckets of risk. A big one is reputational, which is where confidential, of course, legal in some cases, how you maintain confidentiality. Because again, like I said, if you're trying to build trust, not erode it, you have to protect not just the reporter, but the person or the persons reported. They also deserve confidentiality. People think confidentiality ends with the person who has reported. No.
Great point.
Even the person who has been reported deserves and is entitled to privacy, to confidentiality. I tell people that internal investigations are not reputation destroying activities. That's not the business. The company or the organization is not in business to destroy employees' reputations. It's there to find out what has gone wrong and to fix it and to make sure that accountabilities are held properly, but it's not to destroy. So that is why I always say, though a lot of people say, oh, we want their names, we want them hanged on a stick, so to speak, we want them hanged publicly, but we say no. You always have to maintain confidentiality on all sides. So how do you maintain it? First, it starts with, like I said, your policy. Tell people how you would keep their reports confidential, how you will keep the process, even after it has ended, confidential. So confidentiality does not end with when you've completed the investigation and then you are free to start talking about it. No, it survives the investigation until it's at a good point where you can share not every detail, but just enough. And the principle we always apply is on a need to know basis. Need to know is your anchor, like I said, your compass for confidentiality is need to know. Who needs to know? Because not everybody wants to know. We all want information for whatever reason, but who needs to know? So again, like I said, your policy would have set out those who manage the process. If it's in a standard organization, it would be the ethics and compliance. But let's say you don't have ethics and compliance, or it's the legal team or it's the HR team, whichever team is vested with the authority to manage investigations. That team, first of all, is a need to know. They're on the need to know. And then within that, you then know the people who support the team, who are they, and the processes through which they onboard people into that process, how they maintain. So for example, you're bringing someone in from a different function to support an investigation. We have something we call a little nice disclaimer. And, almost like, I even call it, it's almost like a certification of some sort, let me put it that way, where we say we will welcome you, we thank you for supporting this investigation. A quick reminder on your responsibilities on this investigation. Confidentiality. If you have questions, this is the person you reach out to. Don't ask just everybody. If you are struggling with something, so we give FAQs and we let the person sign up to say, I have understood, I will abide. So that again keeps people on a straight and narrow to say, if any leak is traced to someone who is part of the investigative team, clear consequences. And those consequences are embedded in our policy. So in our policy, we have what we call the Living the Code policy. And that code just speaks, amongst other things, it says, if you, and I'm just summarizing, if you, or paraphrasing, if you do anything that impacts negatively the investigative integrity, the process of the investigations, it's a no-go area. And the sanction standard stipulates like minimum and maximum sanctions that can be given. And breach of confidentiality during an internal investigation is a serious one. So again, you communicate that it's not just back, it's bite when it comes to confidentiality. You breach it, you feel the pain, so you don't do it next time. You know? It's not something you get a slap on it. So you do that, and then you also make sure that for confidentiality, you are reassuring people. People are always going to be scared. That's the biggest thing. You might be saying, look, we will keep it confidential, but don't just say we will keep it. How will you keep it confidential? So you have to tell them, you have to take them through the process. First, we are limiting. Your report comes into a specific team. It is limited to that team that is assigned to that investigation. And then we're going to say, if people are going to support us, there's a process through which we onboard them that also preserves the quality of the kinds of people that support that process to preserve confidentiality. And if we hear, because humans, we're not going to be perfect, so you have to give room for someone going outside the box. If someone violates confidentiality, we invite people to report it. It's a violation of the policy itself. So yeah, we invite people to tell us about it, and then we investigate thoroughly. And if it's found that it was breached, there are sanctions. So we also publish reports that have been investigated where people breach confidentiality and where they were sanctioned. So we could really see that there's bite.
Yeah, you just said report. That's amazing. So while I was getting my master's in corporate compliance, one of the class was on investigation, and we went through some of the processes. But at the end, we talked about the transparency part, right? Which was something that I asked. And I think some companies do a better job than others actually now reporting to the employees. What does the hotline compliance call volume looks like? What are the topics? So we talk about confidentialities, nothing specific, it's shared, but I think employees are still curious to know what kind of issues do we have? Is it all manager favoritism issues? Is it all tardy issues? Is it all, nepotism? Is it all bribery, corruption? Like, what is it? And a lot of companies still shy away from giving some information. So I think there should be some kind of a report. And I think in my class, we came across Unilever, and you have a website where you do, I don't know if you still, because it's been a couple of years, but back then we actually did a case study and looked at your website on the information that you published, which was really nice. You had an entire website, and it would give you, and then you could play around and give it by region and give it by the time period you wanted to see, and you could kind of see if it was all the same or different. And I think that's important as a part of the transparency, because
it's a critical thing that organizations continue to struggle with. So I don't think one organization has the magic one to that. I think it's an evolution of how much transparent can you get, and the higher you can get, the better, while still preserving, of course, our values and principles. So here's something that I would suggest, and I think this will cut across industries, like I said, not limited to a specific organization, because it will vary from organization to organization. So but there are general principles that we can all agree work, regardless of your industry, regardless of the size of your organization. So one thing is, if you have reports going to your board, to your management team, you already have something you can share with employees. There's no reason why the board can know something and your employees don't know it.
Great point.
You should, that in itself is favoritism, because you're like, so why is it, there's certain things, of course, business strategies that might not be non-public, but when you're talking about cases that have been investigated, it involves employees. They need to know, because that's how you let them know that you're doing the right thing, and they need to trust that you're doing the right thing. But if you expect, organizations think that by just saying we've done it properly, employees must take that as gospel. No, you have to win trust. You have to build trust. It's not something you immediately inherit because people have started working with you. Trust is not something you buy through employment. It is something you earn through consistent actions and transparency. So one easy thing leaders can do or functions can do is your EC, if you have a fully fledged EC team or legal team managing it, they can give you a redacted version of whatever is being shared on a quarterly basis to say on a quarterly basis, these are how many cases were reported. There are minimum levels of information that employees can have. And you don't need to go into detail to earn trust. They don't need you to start telling them everything. They only need to know, like you said, where are we seeing the issues coming from?
Yep.
Are we seeing consistent sanctioning across work levels, or are we just seeing only junior employees being sanctioned and there's nobody senior being sanctioned? You know, those are things people want to see. So what you do, you first of all talk about how many. So for example, you take a period, a year, quarterly, whichever, monthly, whichever, whichever period of time the organization wants to share the information for. Then you go to the types of the policy that you have. So maybe, for example, you have 10 policies. You want to show out of that 10 policies how many cases you have under each type of policy, because then people start to map issues to policy. You are actually training people while sharing information. You can actually use one stone to kill many birds in this regard. So you are mapping the issues to policy. People then start to correlate action to which policy it is, which helps in the education bit of policy making. And then you then go to the frequency of it. So for example, maybe you're having more safety violations rather than, you start to know automatically that that's where the higher risk is. People can immediately get that. And then you go to how they reported it. Was it anonymously reported, or was it with full disclosure? That tells you again how much people trust your system. So if you have very high levels of anonymity, that is a sense that we need to do more in building trust. And then you look at the functions involved. So is it coming more from supply chain? And supply chain in which region? If it's a multinational company, you want to see. But if it's a small company, you could see, is it coming from the sales team? Is it coming from the supply chain team? Is it coming from the finance team? It gives that, that view. And then you go into substantiation, very important, substantiation rate. So out of, for example, let's say 50 cases reported within a quarter, how many of those cases after investigation was substantiated and how many was not? So when you share that, the next level there is for the substantiated cases, how many led to sanctions? People want to see the results where people with, what happened.
Yeah, exactly. Who's getting fired?
Who's getting fired? That's the real question people want to get down to. That's the real juicy gist everybody is always excited about. Who's getting fired? So we always say to people,
I'm sorry to interrupt, or we have another one. Who's going to be in the next headline is really now popular, right?
Who's going to have the focus on them? So what we do is to make sure that we condition people's mindset, not to think that once you violated the company policy, the next step is a termination. Because people always go from, hey, whatever it is, this person has been reported, I'm expecting the person to be walked out shamefully out of the organization. It doesn't work that way, because there is a range of sanctions for different types of violations. And there are violations, and I always say this to people, in reaching a determination on outcome or sanction, there's always what we call mitigating or aggravating factors. And that makes sure that it's a fair process, because you might do the same, two people might commit the same violation, but there are differences in the motive, in the circumstances. And that always has to factor in. If you go to a default, you violated this termination, boom, you are not going to get that perception of organizational justice or fairness. So it's always about, are you looking at the mitigating? Are you looking at the aggravating factors in reaching, a decision? And the end of it, what I've seen helps a lot of people is when you say the work level. So for example, you say, we investigated even like an executive level employee. And that person, without names, of course, no names, no nothing, but you just say, okay, by work level, for example, if you say junior, mid, senior level, and you say maybe, for example, 3 terminations, 5 warnings, 1 whatever else sanction, and you show that it cuts across, your investigations are holding senior people accountable just as much as it's holding junior level employees accountable, it builds that one stroke builds trust.
So not this year yet, but last year by this time, actually by May, there were about 2 companies that were in the headline just for that. One was Kohl's, that somebody they investigated the CEO for improper personal relationship with the vendor, right? And that was a story, and he was asked to resign. And then there was Nestle, who actually, for similar reason, and I don't know the details, but from what I understand, an employee reported on a hotline call. So can you imagine that investigation? That is wild. But I guess it is encouraging when companies take action when there is a need for it with the high level employees, right? Like that, that speaks a volume to the company culture. I wrote down another thing as you were talking, and the thing that I was thinking of is every complaint that comes in, it's in the way a training opportunity for someone. And I mentioned my integrity playbook with the employees, and managers thinks that they're expert in policies, but when you talk about specifics of the conflict of interest or even gift and entertainment policy, and when you translate it to the day-to-day on the spot decisions, their confidence is actually very low. So here with this, I would say a compliance team should look at all the different calls that and all the different cases that are come in, and obviously with all the levels of detail stripped down, but it comes to an issue of what happened, and use that as a training opportunity so it doesn't happen again. Because I think that is the gold training that you could give someone. Policy is a policy, and they can recite the policy a lot of times, but actually know how to apply it is a gold. Hence,
I think it's 2 things you are touching on, and that's absolutely valid. So in basic ethics and compliance framework, you look at the prevent, detect, and the remediate, right? So prevention is about the training, the education, and then the detect is about, do you have hotlines to pick up issues? And then remediation is what you're speaking to, because that's really where the investigation falls into. Investigation starts with the investigation itself. Then what happens after? So after that is sharing the lessons learned, which is where we're saying, of course, we'll be transparent, you share the lessons learned. But what is even more important is identifying the gaps that the investigation has revealed. Because I say to people, organizations are not in the business of investigation. They're there to make profits. This is not what they're going to spend. They want to spend all their time doing. So you want to make sure that you are not investigating the same thing over and over, because you're not closing the gaps. So again, we call it remediation because you identify. So in the investigation, and we can do this again because I think there's so much value in this process that I don't think this podcast gives us enough time to really, really go in depth. But we can always talk more, share more details with people who want to have it. But let me summarize to say, your investigation of the claim or the report itself, it will have an investigation report template. As part of that template, you will then have not just the issue, the policies impacted, the people impacted, and details of the people. So where are they working? Who is their line manager? How long have they been with the organization? Like full details that allow you to have a full view of who the person is, not just by name or what they've done, but who are they? And how much training have they gone through? We even check how much training they've had. So have they been taking their annual training? We check, because that gives you a view already as to the person you are dealing with, right? How many investigations they've been part of shows you whether this is a repeat offender or not. But like I said, we could have the whole day talking about investigations. But let's wrap up to say, your investigation report template, apart from describing the issues, the people involved, the policies violated, etc., and the outcome, you must always have a section of it that speaks to lessons learned and gaps to be remediated. And as part of those gaps, you would then see, for example, maybe the policy hasn't been, there's no policy, for example, or if there's a policy, it wasn't really circulated, it wasn't really, there wasn't an awareness, employees didn't know. I'm just giving an example. And then you then do what you propose to management to fix. So you can say, for example, I would propose that a new policy be put in place, or maybe the policy be revised, or maybe this person be given additional coaching, whatever it is that closes the gap long term, not short term, long term, that prevents, the aim is to prevent you having to do that investigation on the same matter again because you didn't do it properly. So that's a different and the most, I would say, important process. Apart from instilling trust, it's about making sure that the business is sustainable into the future. And how can it be sustainable? When you identify the gaps through the investigation, you remediate. People focus on sanctions only. Investigations don't just lead to sanctions, they lead to opportunities for the business to fix what they didn't know was wrong and to fix it as permanently as possible.
Excellent. So on that note, we will end. Thank you so much. We have so much to talk about. This is definitely first of many. I enjoyed spending my time with you, and I look forward to the next one.
Me too. Thanks for having me, Evie. It's been really great as always.
Thank you.